There comes a point in life when success, approval, and even self-improvement no longer feel like growth, when something deeper begins to call from beneath the noise. This video is that call. Through the lens of Carl Jung's philosophy, you'll discover what lies behind the mask you wear, how to embrace the parts of yourself you've long disowned, and how to reunite the scattered fragments of who you are. You'll see that the world outside is not separate from you, but mirrors your inner evolution. That meaning itself speaks through the coincidences you once called chance. By the end, you won't just understand Jung's ideas, you'll feel them, in the quiet recognition that authenticity is not found in perfection but in wholeness. This is not another lesson in self-improvement. It's an awakening, a return to your true self. Beneath every polite smile lies a quiet exhaustion. You've worn so many faces that sometimes you forget which one is yours. The mask of composure, the mask of confidence, the one that smiles on cue, nods in meetings, laughs at the right moments. Each one crafted not out of deceit, but survival. Carl Jung called it the persona, the image we present to the world so we can belong. Society rewards it. Parents teach it. The world demands it. But slowly, beneath the layers of performance, something begins to fracture. You start mistaking who you are for who you appear to be. And when that happens, a strange kind of loneliness takes root, the kind that no amount of applause can cure. Jung said, "The persona was never meant to be destroyed, but only recognized. It is a bridge between the inner world and the outer one. But for many, it becomes a prison. You begin to live for appearances, not truth. You act strong when you're falling apart. You call it discipline when it's really fear. You perform authenticity because even vulnerability has become a performance. You tell yourself this is maturity, that being adaptable is survival. But deep down you know it. What you call balance is often self-erasure. This is the quiet tragedy of modern life. Social media has turned the persona into a religion, a digital altar where we sacrifice our sincerity for approval. We curate ourselves into fragments that gain attention but lose soul. Jung warned that the persona grows dangerous the moment we identify with it, the moment we believe the image is the self. Because then, every criticism feels like death. Every rejection feels like annihilation. And so we maintain the illusion at all costs, terrified of being seen without our armor. But what if that armor is what's suffocating you? What if beneath the polished identity lies the abyss Jung spoke of? Not emptiness, but the vast, untamed unconscious that contains everything you've hidden to survive. To face it feels like falling apart, but that fall is sacred. Because the abyss is not your enemy, it's the beginning of your authenticity. Jung believed that confronting it, the part of us we've long denied, is how one becomes real. The persona, he wrote, is what one is in reality not, but what oneself and others think one is. To meet the abyss is to meet yourself for the first time. Perhaps that's why silence feels so uncomfortable. Without the mask, without the noise, there's nothing left to distract you from the truth. You start hearing the voice you buried, the one that says, "This isn't who I am." And yet that voice is the compass home. Because the moment you stop performing, the world may reject you, but your soul begins to recognize you. And so the journey begins, in the space where the mask cracks and something honest starts to breathe again. Beneath the persona lies everything unlived, everything unspoken, everything waiting to be redeemed. It whispers to you, not in words, but in longing, a longing to be whole again. And this longing has a name. It is the shadow's whisper. If this content is resonating with you, consider subscribing. I make videos that help you see the world and yourself more clearly. Thank you. There are parts of you that have never been allowed to speak. They exist in the margins, quiet, unacknowledged, waiting for permission to exist. Jung called this the shadow, the unloved self, the portion of your being you exile so that others might accept what remains. Every trait you've learned to despise in others once lived somewhere inside you. The anger you condemn, the jealousy you judge, the fear you dismiss, all of them belong to you. The world teaches you to hide them because they make you human, and being human is too raw for polite society. So you bury them under ideals, composure, kindness, reason. You call it growth, but it's really suppression wearing the mask of virtue. Yet what you suppress does not die. It descends. The shadow becomes the silent architect of your life. It shapes your choices, your reactions, your relationships. You find yourself drawn to people who mirror what you refuse to face. You resent in them what you secretly fear in yourself. Jung wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves, but that understanding requires humility, the willingness to admit that the darkness you see outside is only a reflection of the one within." In this sense, morality becomes a mirror too. Society calls it goodness to suppress the wild parts of the soul, to be agreeable, measured, inoffensive. But Jung saw this as spiritual amputation. The goal of life, he said, is not to be good, but to be whole. And wholeness demands contradiction. To integrate the shadow is to allow yourself to be complex, capable of anger, yet not consumed by it, capable of desire, yet not enslaved to it. The danger lies not in darkness itself, but in denying its existence. Because what you deny will always return, in projection, in envy, in cycles you cannot seem to break. You see this everywhere, in families where silence replaces honesty, in friendships maintained by pretense, in people who punish others for sins they have not forgiven in themselves. The shadow whispers through these fractures, not to harm, but to guide. It wants recognition, not repression. When you listen closely, your flaws begin to reveal their hidden wisdom. Anger becomes a teacher of boundaries. Envy reveals your unlived desires. Fear points toward what truly matters to you. What once seemed monstrous begins to feel sacred, a wild truth waiting to be integrated. And this is the paradox Jung devoted his life to explaining, that light and darkness are not enemies, but twins. Integration does not mean perfection, it means honesty. To embrace the shadow is not to indulge chaos, but to make peace with it, to hold your contradictions without shame. In that acceptance, something ancient within you begins to stir, a quiet remembrance of who you were before you learned to divide yourself. Because the journey of healing is not about becoming someone new, but about reclaiming what you abandoned in order to survive. When the shadow is finally seen, it no longer needs to hide. Its whisper softens into guidance. Its presence becomes power. And from this reconciliation, from this rare union of light and dark, arises the next great task of the human spirit, the path to wholeness. There comes a time when all the fragments of who you've been begin to call for one another. The mask grows heavy. The shadow grows restless. The person you show the world and the person who waits beneath the surface begin to ache for reunion. Jung called this the process of individuation, the long, quiet pilgrimage toward becoming whole. It is not a single act of self-discovery, but a lifelong unfolding, a slow alchemy where every contradiction, every rejected memory, every painful truth is melted down and reforged into a single being. Individuation is not about becoming perfect, it is about becoming real. It is the art of remembering that your soul was never broken, only scattered. The modern mind treats self-development as a ladder, higher, better, cleaner. But Jung's philosophy reveals something humbler and infinitely deeper. It is not ascent that liberates, but integration. True growth is not an escape from the human condition, but a reconciliation with it. The ego dreams of transcendence, the self dreams of unity. And in the meeting of those two longings, something divine takes shape, not outside you, but within. This inner reconciliation mirrors the wisdom of ancient philosophy. The Greeks spoke of noti se auton, know thyself, not as an intellectual pursuit, but as a sacred duty. To know oneself was to touch the eternal. Jung saw this same principle in psychology. When you descend into your own depths, you do not simply find the personal, you touch the universal. The symbols, the myths, the dreams, they are not just remnants of private experience, but the shared language of the human soul. To individuate is to align with that greater pattern, to live not as a fragment of the world, but as a reflection of its totality. Yet the process demands courage, for individuation often begins with disillusionment. Everything familiar, your beliefs, your ambitions, your identity, begins to lose its certainty. The persona no longer fits, the shadow no longer frightens. You start to live from an inner compass rather than an outer script, and this change does not go unnoticed. The world may mistake your silence for distance, your honesty for rebellion. But beneath that friction lies liberation. You are no longer driven by approval or avoidance. You are guided by a quieter truth, one that does not shout, but radiates. The paradox of individuation is that by turning inward, you begin to participate more deeply in life. The more you recognize your own depths, the more vividly the world responds. You begin to see how everything, from heartbreak to coincidence, forms a dialogue between your inner and outer worlds. Jung described this as the psyche's mysterious correspondence with reality, a dance between matter and meaning. It's as if the universe itself begins to speak the language of your soul. And here, the boundaries between psychology and mysticism blur. Because once you begin to live in alignment with your inner truth, the world around you starts to echo it back, through symbols, timing, and chance. These are not accidents, they are mirrors. Jung called this phenomenon synchronicity, moments where inner transformation reveals itself through outer events. And that is where our next journey begins, the language of the soul. There are moments when life begins to feel strangely alive, when events seem to conspire, when a sentence overheard in passing answers a question you never asked aloud, when the right book appears at the right time, when silence itself feels like conversation. Jung called this synchronicity, the meeting point between inner and outer worlds, where the psyche and cosmos move in rhythm. To the modern mind, these moments seem accidental. But to Jung, they were proof that meaning is woven into existence, that the universe itself participates in the unfolding of the soul. The logic of the world tells us that everything happens by chance, that cause and effect govern all things. But meaning follows a different law, a law of resonance. When something within you begins to transform, the outer world rearranges to mirror it. Life starts to respond like an echo, revealing through coincidence what consciousness has not yet spoken. The philosopher would say the world is symbolic. Jung would say it is alive with psyche. You are not simply walking through existence. Existence is walking through you. Synchronicity is not superstition nor divine favoritism. It is communication. It is the soul speaking through pattern. Dreams, symbols, encounters, each a fragment of the same dialogue, each a gesture from the unseen toward the seen. The rational mind resists this, fearing mystery, preferring control. But there is a kind of intelligence that moves beneath reason, a quiet orchestration that guides without command. Those who learn to listen to it discover that meaning was never absent. It was only waiting for the noise to stop. In those rare instances when you feel utterly aligned, when intuition replaces strategy, when effort dissolves into presence, something ancient awakens. You begin to sense that consciousness itself is not confined to the mind, that perhaps the same force that shapes galaxies also shapes your choices. This is not delusion, it is participation. To live symbolically is to recognize that life is not merely happening to you, it is happening with you. The outer world becomes a mirror for the inner one, and every reflection invites understanding. Jung believed that when a person becomes authentic, when the mask drops and the shadow is embraced, life begins to arrange itself around that authenticity. The coincidences that follow are not miracles, they are confirmations. They whisper, "You are on the right path." This is the quiet reward of individuation, not fame, not certainty, but a dialogue with existence itself. And perhaps that is all we have ever wanted, not to control life, but to be in conversation with it. To sense that the moments we call random are, in truth, threads in a vast and intelligent design. The self, Jung said, is both the traveler and the destination. To live in harmony with it is to feel the universe breathe through you, a rhythm beyond ambition, beyond fear, beyond the narrow edges of the ego. If this reflection has stirred something within you, if a part of it spoke in the language you've always understood but never had words for, share what it awakened. Your thoughts may become the echo someone else needs to hear. And if this journey through Jung's philosophy has resonated, let it continue. Leave a like, a comment, or simply share it forward. Because every act of understanding, no matter how small, adds to the quiet work of consciousness remembering itself, the timeless dialogue we call the language of the soul.